The coffee cup sat alone on the polished conference table, still half full and cold. Russell Crane had seen it there every night for the past 3 weeks, always in the same spot, always forgotten by the same person. The CEO never remembered to take it with her when she finally left her office past midnight, and Russell never mentioned it when he came through with his cleaning cart. That was the unspoken rule of night shift custodial work. A person existed in the spaces between other people's lives, invisible and silent. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, the laptop was still open beside that forgotten coffee cup, its screen glowing with files that should never be seen. And when Russell's hand reached for the water bottle on his cart, when the liquid spilled across that keyboard in one irreversible moment, he knew he was about to break every rule he had followed for the past 5 years. The fluorescent lights on the 15th floor hummed as Russell pushed his cart down the executive corridor. Past 11:30 on a Thursday night, the building should have been empty except for security and the occasional workaholic. But the light was still on in the corner office with the brass nameplate reading Juliet Harlow, Chief Executive Officer. Russell paused outside the adjacent conference room, seeing the remnants of an intense evening session through the glass walls. Scattered coffee cups, open presentation binders, the massive screen still glowing with the company logo. He had cleaned this room hundreds of times over the past 5 years, moving with practiced efficiency that came from repetition and necessity. The job paid enough to keep his 10-year-old daughter Iris fed and housed, which was more than he could say for the career he had left behind. 5 years ago, Russell Crane had been a cybersecurity engineer in Boston, the kind of job where you wore button-down shirts and argued about encryption protocols. He had been good at it too, good enough that when he noticed irregularities in system logs, he reported them exactly as he was supposed to. What he had not anticipated was that the irregularities led to someone 3 levels above him, someone with enough influence to make evidence disappear and redirect blame downward. Within 2 weeks, Russell found himself accused of corporate espionage, escorted out with a cardboard box and a reputation that made him unemployable in his field. The divorce followed 6 months later. His wife Melissa moved to Seattle, sent sporadic support payments, and called maybe once every few months. Russell took the first job that would hire someone with his background: night shift custodial work at Whitmore Technologies, a company large enough not to ask too many questions. As Russell wiped down the conference table, something caught his eye: a thin black cable running along the baseboard behind the credenza, disappearing into the wall panel. He froze. He had cleaned this room 5 nights a week for 5 years. He knew every outlet, every cable jack, every piece of infrastructure. This cable was new, and it was wrong. The connection point was not standard, but something recently installed without the usual faceplate that came with approved modifications. Russell crouched down, pulling his phone out and snapping a photo. Every instinct from his former life screamed that this was not right. Unauthorized network access points were textbook indicators of security breaches. He should report it first thing in the morning, fill out a maintenance request, and let IT handle it. That was the safe choice for a single father who could not afford to lose his only steady income. But something nagged at him. The cable was too deliberately hidden, too carefully routed. And there was something else he had noticed over recent weeks. CEO Juliet Harlow's office light burning later and later, her coffee cups multiplying, tension visible in her shoulders even from across the hallway. Whatever was happening at Whitmore Technologies was big. Russell was reaching for his vacuum when voices approached from the hallway. The conference room door opened and Juliet strode in, followed by her executive assistant Sterling Wade and a stranger in an expensive suit. Juliet looked exhausted, her normally perfect appearance slightly disheveled. "I apologize for the late hour," Juliet said to the stranger, her voice carrying forced professional courtesy. "But given the sensitive nature of this agreement, I thought it best to finalize details before the official signing tomorrow morning." Russell moved toward the door, making himself small and unobtrusive the way custodial workers learned to do. Sterling held up a hand without quite looking at him. "Give us 15 minutes. We need the room private." Russell wheeled his cart into the hallway, parking near the elevators where he could see the conference room through glass walls. The presentation that appeared on the wall screen was labeled Project Aquila, Strategic Partnership with Meridian Technologies. Even from this distance, Russell recognized what he was looking at: a major technology transfer agreement involving patents, proprietary systems, and huge sums of money. Whitmore had been developing smart sensor technology for water management systems, something worth billions if they could bring it to market before competitors. The meeting stretched past 15 minutes, then 20. At 12:15, the stranger left. Juliet and Sterling had an intense conversation before Sterling departed as well. Juliet remained, slumping in her chair with her laptop open. Russell knocked softly on the doorframe. "Excuse me, ma'am. Is it all right if I finish?" Juliet looked up, exhaustion breaking through her CEO facade. "What? Oh, yes, of course." She gathered her things quickly and headed toward her office. Russell resumed cleaning, but 10 minutes later he noticed Juliet had left her laptop on the credenza near the window, still closed but with the power light glowing. He glanced toward her office. The light was still on. She would probably realize and come back for it. 15 minutes passed. The laptop remained, green light pulsing steadily. Russell drifted back toward it, drawn by instinct he could not name. That unauthorized cable behind the credenza was still bothering him, and here was the CEO's laptop sitting feet away from it. He reached for a water bottle on his cart, hands slightly damp from cleaning solution. Later he would tell himself it was an accident, but when the bottle slipped from his grasp and landed directly on the laptop, sending water cascading across the closed lid, some part of him knew it was more than that. "No, no, no!" Russell grabbed the laptop, flipping it upright. The device woke automatically, screen lighting up. Russell frantically wiped at the keyboard when the display caught his attention and froze him in place. The laptop showed a terminal window with green text scrolling past at high speed. Russell's former career roared back as he recognized a data transfer operation running in background, files uploading to a remote server. The destination was visible: meridiansecure.net. The files being transferred all began with Aquila Core, followed by version numbers. Someone was copying Project Aquila directly to Meridian Technologies' server, not through official channels but through a backdoor process designed to avoid detection. This was not legitimate partnership exchange. This was data exfiltration. "What are you doing?" The voice behind him made Russell spin around. Juliet stood in the doorway, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm as she registered the scene. Her laptop in Russell's hands, water dripping, and the terminal window visible behind him. I'm so sorry," Russell started. "I knocked over a water bottle. It was an accident. I was just trying to dry it off." But Juliet was not looking at him. She was looking at the screen, and color was draining from her face. She crossed the distance in 3 strides, snatching the laptop. "Security! I'm calling security!" "Wait!" Russell said forcefully. Juliet's finger paused over her phone. "Wait! Look at your screen. Really look at it. I don't need to look at anything except a janitor who has clearly overstepped every boundary," Juliet said, but her eyes had already flicked to the laptop, and Russell saw recognition dawn. "That's a data transfer operation," Russell said quickly, technical language returning like muscle memory. "Port 443 outbound, masquerading as HTTPS traffic to avoid firewall detection. The destination is meridiansecure.net. Unless I'm wrong, that's not an approved portal. Someone is copying your Project Aquila files to Meridian's server without proper channels." Juliet stared at him, then at the screen, then back. "How do you—" She stopped, shook her head. "It doesn't matter. This is corporate property. You have no right. I know what data exfiltration looks like, Russell interrupted. I used to work in cybersecurity before I became a janitor. 5 years ago, I was a network security engineer, and I'm telling you right now, someone is stealing your company's most valuable technology. The silence was broken only by the building's HVAC hum and a distant elevator ding. Juliet looked at Russell for a long moment, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time in 5 years. Then she looked back at the laptop where the terminal window continued its relentless scroll. Security is on their way, Juliet said quietly, and Russell's stomach dropped. But then she added, "But before they get here, you're going to tell me everything you know about what's on this screen." Security guards appeared in the doorway, hands resting on their belts. Juliet held up one hand without looking away from Russell. "Wait outside. I'll call if I need you." The guards stepped back into the hallway. Russell felt something unclench in his chest. If Juliet was willing to hear him out rather than have him arrested immediately, maybe there was a chance. "Show me," Juliet said, setting the laptop on the table. "Show me what you're seeing." Russell moved beside her, hyper-aware of guards watching through glass and the precipice he balanced on. He pointed at the terminal. "This is a remote shell session. Someone has backdoor access to your system. They're using rsync over SSH to copy files, which looks like legitimate encrypted traffic to most monitoring. The destination domain is registered to Whitmore Technologies. Based on file sizes and transfer rates, this has been running at least 20 minutes. Juliet leaned closer, exhaustion replaced by sharp focus. "But we have a data-sharing agreement with Meridian. We're supposed to be transferring specifications as part of the partnership, through approved channels with proper authentication and logging," Russell said. "This is someone copying your entire core technology through a back door. Look at the file names, not specification documents, source code repositories, testing data, manufacturing protocols. Everything someone would need to replicate your technology without you." Juliet's hand moved to her mouth. "The contract signing is at 8 this morning. 7 hours from now, we're finalizing a $3.2 billion partnership giving Meridian exclusive manufacturing rights for revenue share." She turned to Russell. "If they already have our technology, they can manufacture it themselves." Russell finished. "Cut you out entirely. By the time your legal team realizes and files suit, they'll be 6 months ahead in production and your patents tied up in international court for years." Juliet reached for her phone. "I'm calling Preston Ellis, our head of IT. If what you're saying is true, he needs to shut this down immediately." She paused. "And you need to stay until we sort this out. Those guards aren't leaving, and neither are you." Russell nodded. He had expected as much. Preston Ellis arrived within 20 minutes, a tall man in his late 40s with graying hair and the rumpled look of someone roused from sleep. He listened to Juliet's explanation, glanced at Russell with skepticism, then moved to the laptop and began typing with fluid confidence. "She's right," Preston said after minutes, disbelief in his voice. "There's a rootkit at driver level, masquerading as a touchpad update from 6 weeks ago. It's sophisticated. Military-grade obfuscation. Set to auto-delete at 6 a.m., 2 hours before contract signing." He looked up. "Someone with administrative access installed this deliberately." Juliet sank into a chair. "Who had access?" Preston scrolled through log files. "The malware was installed using your credentials on October 17th, a Friday. You were in Chicago for the board meeting." He looked at Juliet. "Who had physical access to your laptop while you were gone?" The silence was profound. Russell watched realization hit Juliet like a physical blow. "Sterling," she whispered. "Sterling Wade, my executive assistant. I asked him to install presentation software before I returned. He's been with me 3 years. It can't be Sterling." "We need to verify the network access point," Preston said, standing. He glanced at Russell. "Show me." Russell led them to the credenza. They moved it from the wall, revealing the cable. Preston examined it with a flashlight. "Definitely unauthorized. Direct fiber connection bypassing main switching infrastructure. Someone needed building access and technical knowledge to install this unnoticed." He stood. "Your assistant has both. He coordinates with building maintenance, would know custodial schedules." "We need to bring Sterling in," Juliet said, reaching for her phone. But Preston held up a hand. "If we confront him now, we only have circumstantial evidence. The malware, the cable, the timing. Any lawyer will argue someone else used his access, that he was set up. We need proof of intent." He looked at Russell. "How much longer until transfer completes?" Russell considered what he had seen. "Based on data volume, probably 2 hours. Maybe less." "Then we have a window," Preston said. "We let it complete but document everything. Capture network traffic, pull security footage showing cable installation, build an airtight case." He turned to Juliet. "And check the contract you're signing. If Sterling's stealing technology, there's a good chance he influenced partnership terms favoring Meridian." Juliet looked between them. "You're asking me to let someone finish stealing billions of dollars so we can gather evidence?" "I'm asking you to be smart," Preston said. "Shut down now. Sterling and whoever he's working with know we're onto them. They destroy evidence, lawyer up, and we prove nothing. But document the complete transfer, trace where data goes, maybe feed them modified files with tracking embedded. We prove not just that a crime occurred, but exactly who committed it and what they intended." The calculation was cold and logical, but Russell saw what it cost Juliet. She was being asked to watch someone she trusted betray her in real time. "Do it," she said finally. "But I want Sterling here at 6:30, half hour after transfer completes. If we're doing this, I want to look him in the eye." Preston nodded and set up packet capture on his laptop. Juliet called her lawyer Nora Kingsley, who arrived within an hour, despite the ungodly timing. While Preston documented the breach, Russell mostly sat quietly, occasionally answering technical questions. At 3:47 a.m., Preston's laptop chimed. "Transfer complete. All files successfully copied to Meridian's server. The malware just initiated self-delete. It'll be gone by 6. He showed Juliet his screen. "I've got complete packet captures, timestamps, file checksums, everything we need. And security footage of Sterling entering this room after hours on October 17th with a toolbox, leaving 45 minutes later. No maintenance requests on file for that date." Juliet closed her eyes briefly, shoulders slumping before she visibly pulled herself together. "Call Sterling. Tell him I need him at 6:30 for emergency pre-meeting before contract signing. Don't give details." Preston made the call, voice carefully neutral. Sterling agreed without questioning it. "He'll be here," Preston confirmed. Sounded surprised but not suspicious. The waiting was harder after that. Russell checked his phone, saw a text from his neighbor Mrs. Chen confirming she would get Iris to school. He typed thanks and tried not to think about explaining any of this to his daughter. At 6:28, Sterling Wade stepped off the elevator carrying 2 coffee cups, looking freshly showered and changed. He was younger than Russell had realized, maybe 35, with polished appearance that came from expensive grooming. He smiled when he saw Juliet through the glass, expression open and guileless. Russell's stomach turned. This was someone who had spent 3 years gaining Juliet's trust, positioning himself to be indispensable while planning devastating betrayal. "Good morning," Sterling said, entering and setting a coffee before Juliet. "Preston said you needed me early but didn't say why. Is everything okay with the Meridian signing?" The silence lasted a beat too long. Sterling's smile faltered as he registered the others. Preston at his laptop, Nora with her leather portfolio, security guards visible through glass, and Russell in his janitor's uniform. "What's going on?" Juliet stood. "Sterling, I need you to look at something." She turned Preston's laptop showing split view. Security footage of Sterling installing the cable, and network traffic logs showing data transfer to Meridian's servers. Blood drained from Sterling's face, but he recovered quickly. "I don't understand. What am I looking at?" "You're looking at evidence of corporate espionage," Nora said matter-of-factly. "Video documentation of you installing unauthorized network access and digital forensic proof of you using it to copy proprietary data to Meridian Technologies. You're looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison if you don't cooperate right now." Sterling turned to Juliet, calculation happening behind his eyes. "Juliet, you have to believe me." "Don't," Juliet said, voice colder than Russell had heard. "Don't insult me by lying. I trusted you, brought you in when you were a 20-year-old intern who couldn't afford business clothes, mentored you, defended you to the board, and you repaid that by selling everything I built." Sterling's composure cracked. "They offered me $500,000. Do you know what that means to someone like me? Someone who grew up with nothing? You talk about building this company, but you started with a trust fund and connections. You've never had to choose between principles and survival, so you chose money." Juliet said flatly. "I chose a future," Sterling shot back. "Not spending my life as someone's assistant. Meridian promised me a VP position once they launched Aquila technology. Real power, real equity." Russell recognized the justification for what it was, a story to make betrayal feel like justice. It was never about fairness. It was ego and greed dressed as righteousness. Nora had been taking notes. "Mr. Wade, I'm giving you one chance to make this less catastrophic. Cooperate fully, provide testimony about Meridian contacts, potentially negotiate a plea agreement with reduced charges, or remain hostile, and my client pursues maximum criminal and civil penalties." Sterling looked around, searching for sympathy or escape, and finding neither. When his eyes landed on Russell, anger flashed. "Who the hell is this guy? Some janitor sitting in on confidential business? You want to talk about security breaches, maybe explain why you're sharing privileged information with cleaning staff." "This janitor caught you," Juliet said. "He noticed your cable installation and recognized data exfiltration on my laptop. He's also a former cybersecurity engineer with more integrity than you've shown your entire time here." Sterling laughed bitterly. "A janitor who used to be an engineer. Right. Let me guess. He got fired for incompetence, and now he's playing hero." Russell met Sterling's eyes. "I got fired for doing exactly what I did last night, noticing a security breach and reporting it. The difference is that this time someone actually listened." The truth landed hard. Sterling's face twisted, and for a moment Russell thought he might lunge, but security guards were already moving into position. "Sterling Wade," Nora said formally, "you're terminated from Whitmore Technologies effective immediately. We'll be filing criminal charges with the FBI within the hour. Security will escort you to collect personal items under supervision, then remove you from premises." Sterling didn't answer. He just stood there, flanked by guards, looking at Juliet with hatred mixed with something that might have been regret. Then he turned and walked out, guards following. The silence after was profound. Juliet sank into her chair, hands shaking slightly as she picked up Sterling's coffee and set it down without drinking. "I need to cancel the contract signing, call an emergency board meeting, prepare a press statement." She turned to Russell. "I owe you an apology for how you were treated when you tried to help. I owe you thanks for persisting. And I owe you a conversation about what happens next because you're clearly more than a janitor." Russell felt something shift in his chest. Hope. "I have a daughter who depends on me. Whatever happens, I can't risk losing the ability to provide for her. The custodial job is secure. Anything else would be a gamble." "Then let's make it calculated instead of blind," Juliet said. She typed on her phone, then showed Russell. An email to HR requesting immediate personnel review for Russell Crane, with eye toward creating a new position in security infrastructure. I can't promise you'll get back everything you lost, but I can promise you won't be emptying trash cans unless you choose to. This company needs people who spot threats and have courage to speak up. You've proven you're both. Russell stared at the email, at the possibility of a future that didn't involve night shifts and explaining to Iris why Daddy cleans offices. I need to think about it. Fair enough, Juliet said. Take today off. Paid. Go home, check on your daughter, get sleep. We'll talk tomorrow. She offered her hand. Russell shook it, seeing genuine respect in her eyes. As Russell headed toward the elevator, he texted Mrs. Chen. On my way home. Iris, okay? Response came immediately. She's fine. Made pancakes. Wants to know if you'll be there when she gets home from school. Russell typed. I'll be there. Promise. The 3 months that followed were controlled chaos of federal investigations and corporate restructuring that Russell observed mostly from sidelines. Juliet created a new position for him, head of cyber resilience, with salary that made his head spin and responsibilities both terrifying and exhilarating. He would build comprehensive security programs, reporting directly to the CEO with authority to investigate any threats regardless of origin in company hierarchy. The FBI investigation moved quickly. Sterling had not been alone. 3 Meridian executives, including CEO Vaughn Mitchell, were arrested on industrial espionage and conspiracy charges. The evidence was overwhelming. Not just the exfiltration Russell discovered, but emails discussing timeline, financial transfers to Sterling's offshore accounts, even a draft press release Meridian had prepared announcing their revolutionary new water sensor technology. Sterling took a plea deal. 5 years federal prison in exchange for testimony. Russell attended sentencing, watching Sterling accept responsibility in formal, emotionless language lawyer's script. Afterward in the hallway, Sterling's gaze found Russell's across the crowd. No anger remained, just hollow resignation Russell found more disturbing than hatred would have been. Whitmore's stock took initial hit when breach news went public, but transparent handling and swift action ultimately strengthened investor confidence. Juliet held a press conference explaining what happened, crediting the dedicated employee who caught the threat and outlining new security measures. She asked if Russell wanted to be identified by name. He declined. The last thing he needed was his face across tech news sites with his tech core history potentially dredged up. But within the company, Russell's role was hardly secret. Employees who used to ignore him when he pushed a cart now stopped him in hallways to ask about security or report suspicious emails. It was strange being visible again, valued for expertise instead of invisible. Most days Russell liked it. Some days it felt like wearing an ill-fitting costume. Iris adjusted better than expected. She had been scared when he explained his job was changing, worried it meant something bad, like when Daddy lost his job in Boston. But Russell showed her his new business cards with Head of Cyber Resilience printed below his name, and she traced the letters and said, "That sounds like a superhero job." She insisted on bringing a card to school for show and tell, reportedly telling her class her dad saves companies from bad guys on the internet. The new schedule meant Russell could drop Iris at school mornings and pick her up most afternoons, something he had not done since divorce. They fell into new routines. Breakfast together, after-school snacks, evenings helping with homework or watching nature documentaries Iris loved. Financial stability helped too. Russell moved them from cramped apartment to small house with yard, enough space for Iris to have her own room and Russell a home office. But despite improvements, despite vindication and resurrection and comfortable ending that seemed too neat to be real, Russell thought about that conference room night more than expected. Not the dramatic parts. What stuck was smaller, The moment standing at 11:30 p.m. looking at Juliet's abandoned laptop, knowing he could walk away and finish his shift safely, or do something that might cost him everything. He had made the right choice, obviously, but it had not felt obvious then. It felt terrifying and risky, like a decision that could blow up exactly the way reporting at TechCore had blown up 5 years earlier. The only difference was Juliet had been willing to listen instead of assuming the worst. And that difference changed everything. On a Friday evening in early February, almost 3 months after the night Russell poured water on a laptop and changed his life's trajectory, Juliet asked him to stop by her office before leaving. Russell checked his watch. 4:30. He had promised Iris he would be home by 5:30 to help practice for her school science fair, where she was presenting a project about water filtration that had perhaps been slightly influenced by her father's work at a water sensor company. He knocked on Juliet's door and found her at her desk, looking at her computer. The office was different now. After the breach, Juliet insisted on complete security overhaul, including replacing her laptop, installing biometric authentication on executive systems, implementing clean desk policy. The changes had been disruptive and expensive, but necessary. "Come in," Juliet said, gesturing to a chair. "I wanted to show you something before it goes public Monday." She turned her monitor. The press release headline read, "Whitmore Technologies announces successful launch of Project Aquila Smart Sensor Platform." Russell scanned details about manufacturing partnership with a different company, strengthened patent protections post-Meridian incident, projected market impact. "This is huge! Congratulations!" "We wouldn't be here without you," Juliet said. "If Sterling had succeeded, Meridian would have beaten us to market with our own technology. We would have spent years in legal battles while they captured share. The company probably wouldn't have survived." She paused. "I've said this before, but I'll say again, I owe you everything." Russell shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what anyone should have done." "But most people wouldn't have," Juliet countered. "Most people in your position would have walked away. You had every reason to protect yourself, not get involved, let someone else deal with problems above your pay grade." She stood and walked to the window. "I've been thinking about why." She looked out at the city view Russell used to see cleaning this office late nights. "I think it's because you understand something most people at my level forget. Job titles don't determine character. The person emptying trash might have more integrity than the VP in corner office, and courage to do right when it's difficult. That's not something you can put on a resume. It's just who someone is at their core." Russell thought about Sterling, about choices that seemed justified but destroyed his career and sent him to prison. About the TechCore executive who framed him, probably sleeping soundly with clear conscience. And about Juliet, who had been willing to trust a janitor's assessment over her longtime assistant's loyalty. "I had good reasons to walk away," Russell admitted. "I spent 5 years keeping my head down because last time I tried being hero, it cost me everything. But I kept thinking about Iris, about what example I was setting. If I taught her the safe choice is always right, that you only speak up when there's no risk, what kind of person would she become?" He met Juliet's eyes. "I couldn't do that. Couldn't let her grow up thinking her dad looked the other way." Juliet nodded slowly. "My father used to say integrity is what you do when nobody's watching. But I think it's more. It's what you do when people are watching and telling you to stop, when doing right costs you something real, when smart money says protect yourself." She handed Russell a folder with Whitmore logo embossed. "You did that. I want to make sure it's recognized properly." Inside was a formal letter. Russell skimmed phrases like exemplary service, exceptional integrity, special recognition award. The number at bottom made him blink and reread. "This is a year's salary," Russell said, looking up confused. "As bonus? That can't be right." "It's right," Juliet confirmed. "Board approved unanimously. They wanted more, but I said you'd probably be uncomfortable with anything too extravagant." She smiled slightly. Was I wrong? Russell thought about what that money meant. Iris's college fund fully established. The financial anxieties that had haunted him for 5 years suddenly manageable. Security for years to come. I don't know what to say. Say you'll stay, Juliet said. I know you signed a 2-year contract, but contracts can be broken if someone gets recruited. I need you here, Russell. Not just because you're good at technical work, though you are, but because you're the kind of person who makes everyone around you better by example. That's not a skill you can train. It's who you are. Russell looked at the letter, at his name in formal type and signature line waiting for acknowledgement. He thought about the night he spilled water on a laptop, the split-second decision to look at the screen instead of just cleaning up and moving on. How easily things could have gone differently. I'll stay, he said. As long as Iris and I can keep our Friday science nights, that's non-negotiable. Juliet laughed, tension breaking. Deal. Friday nights are sacred, though if her water filtration project wins science fair, I'm claiming partial credit for employing her father at a water technology company. Russell signed the letter and promised availability for any media requests, though they agreed he would still avoid being public face. Some things were better kept quiet, including his tech core history. As Russell left Juliet's office and headed toward elevator, he passed the conference room where everything started. The cable had been removed months ago, unauthorized access eliminated, wall properly sealed. But Russell still paused sometimes walking past, remembering what it felt like to see that screen full of scrolling file names, to understand instantly that something terrible was happening, and he was the only one who knew. The elevator arrived. Russell stepped inside, pressing ground floor button. Through glass walls he watched the city spread below as he descended, late afternoon sun casting long shadows between buildings. His phone buzzed with text from Iris. Dad, when are you coming home? I need help with my poster, and Mrs. Chen doesn't know about lamination. Russell smiled and typed, Leaving now. 20 minutes. We'll fix it together. The elevator reached lobby, and Russell walked out into February cold, pulling his coat tight and heading toward parking garage. His car was modest, a used sedan, but it ran well, and Iris had decorated the dashboard with sea creature stickers from her marine biology phase last summer. As he drove home through rush hour, Russell thought about the strange path his life had taken. Ambitious engineer to disgraced scapegoat, to night janitor to head of security at major tech company. Not a trajectory anyone would plan, but somehow it led him to a place where he could look in mirror and feel something he had not felt in long time. Pride. Not pride in job title or salary or even the dramatic story. Pride in simpler fact that when it mattered, when Iris would someday ask if he had been the kind of person who stood up for what was right even when hard, he could say yes. He could tell her about the night he poured water on a laptop and everything changed, and she would understand the important part was not the water or laptop or even billions at stake. The important part was the choice, the moment when he could have walked away and instead decided to look closer. That moment, more than anything that followed, was what Russell wanted his daughter to learn from his example. That sometimes doing right means risking everything you have left. And sometimes, if you're lucky, and the person on other side is willing to listen, that risk pays off in ways you never imagined. Russell pulled into his driveway and saw Iris's face appear in front window, expression lighting up when she recognized his car. She was at the door before he could get keys out, bouncing with excitement about her science fair project and talking so fast he could barely follow. He listened and smiled and let her pull him inside to kitchen table, where her poster board was spread out half-finished, surrounded by markers and printed photos and a detailed diagram she had drawn of water moving through filtration layers. Okay, Russell said, sitting down and examining her work. Let's talk about lamination. And as he helped his daughter perfect her presentation, explaining concepts and troubleshooting problems, and praising her careful work, Russell felt the last piece of past 5 years finally settle into place. This was what mattered, not corner office or press releases or recognition from people he barely knew. This, a Friday evening in February, a kitchen table covered in science fair supplies, and a little girl who believed her father could help her solve any problem because he had taught her that's what a person does when something matters. A person doesn't walk away. A person looks closer. And a person does whatever it takes to make things right.